Hi, and welcome to our Ephphatha Bible study. My name is John Crabtree. I'm the pastor of First United Methodist Church in Mountain City, Tennessee, and Trade United Methodist Church in Trade, Tennessee. Well, today we're looking at Genesis chapter 37, the beginning of the Joseph narrative. We've looked at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and how God has used them in spite of themselves almost, used them in their brokenness and their stubbornness and in their humanness. And so now we're going to begin the Joseph cycle and see how God uses him. But before we begin that, we're going to look at our mug of the week. This is another one that my wife, she hand formed this one in a pottery class, and I really love the colors, and I appreciate her making that for me. So thanks, sweetie. And I don't drink out of this one. It's too important to me, so I leave that on the shelf in my collection. But I really like that. So Jacob, Israel, has returned to Canaan, returned to the land of his father and his grandfather, Abraham and Isaac, and he's raising his family. And Joseph is the youngest, and it begins Genesis 37 begins, Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them to their father. So I remember being 17 and remembering that I knew it all. I had it all figured out, and if everybody would just listen to me and do what I said, that world would be a much better place. With time, with age, and hopefully with experience and wisdom, sometimes we find out that maybe we didn't know quite as much as we thought we did. But I remember that age quite well. So being his father's favorite, I'm sure might have added to that a little bit. So here he is telling tales. It goes on to say that Jacob, Israel, loved him more than all his other sons and made him a long robe with sleeves. It doesn't mention many colors and things like that I don't know where that comes in, but here it just says a long robe with sleeves, but it's evidently a mark of special favor. So Joseph goes on and has dreams that he shares with his brothers. Oh, by the way, his brothers really didn't like him. He told tales on them, and they saw he was their father's favorite, so they hated him. That's what the Bible says. They hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. That's verse 4. Verse 5, it goes on to say, once Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered round it, and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream too. Joseph was telling the truth. He was indeed going to have dominion over his brothers, and his brothers were going to bow down to him. That's a little further afield, but right now they hate him even more for it. And Jesus talks about speaking the truth in love, and I think we need to be we need to choose our words with care, especially when we're speaking God's truth, that we need to be careful about how we phrase things and how things might be heard as much as how we're trying to make sure that we're expressing ourselves. We need to make sure we understand how our words are going to be received, because that sure does impact how the message is received, how we deliver. Our delivery impacts the message, how it's received. So, the brothers go off to tend the flocks. They apparently travel far, and Joseph is sent out by Jacob to check on them and bring back a report, see how they're doing. And so he wanders off and goes looking for them and finds them. And let's see, verse 18. They saw him from a distance, Joseph. They saw Joseph from a distance. Before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say a wild animal has devoured him. then we shall see what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, Reuben was the oldest, he delivered Joseph out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him and restore him to his father." So Reuben was going to get Joseph out of the pit, get little brother out of the pit, and take him back home. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty; there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own good flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where can I turn?" Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in his blood. They had the long robe with the sleeves taken to his father, and they said, "This we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not." Notice they didn't say our brother's robe. They said, "See if this is your son's robe or not." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him, and Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Thus his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So Joseph has been sold as a slave in Egypt. His brothers have done this to him. And so the question becomes, God is going to do great things for the family, and the family become the people of the promised land. So God is going to do great things for the nation of Israel, and that comes through Joseph being in Egypt. So did the brothers sin, or did the brothers do the will of God? That's a really good question, and I'm sorry I don't have a good solid answer for you. My take on it is that the brothers exercised their free will and made sinful choices, and God used their sinful choices to accomplish his will. And God, being God, probably knew, almost certainly knew, in their hearts what they planned to do beforehand and made his plans accordingly. He knew they were going to be jealous and envious and try to get rid of him, and planned to bring good out of it. This sounds an awful lot like what happens later with Jesus on the cross. Many folks argue that Judas, who also betrayed a loved one for silver, 30 pieces instead of 20 pieces, that betrayed Jesus for silver, he accomplished God's purpose, and he should maybe even be respected for that. I don't think so. I think Judas and Joseph's brothers, who are the patriarchs, by the way, the leaders of what become the 12 tribes of Israel, they make sinful choices. They've sinned. But God, in God's awesomeness, uses our human sin, our human decisions, and accomplishes his perfect purposes anyway. So I thank God that he is able, and he's smarter than we are. God knows when we screw up, and God is able to bring good out of it. So I thank God for that. By the way, that's not an excuse for us to make bad decisions and trust God to fix our mess. We still need to be trying to follow Jesus every way that we can. But in this case, God will bring good out of this sinful, terrible situation. So next week we'll continue on with the story of Joseph and see what he gets up to. But until then, God bless you. Have a blessed week. Stay safe. keep the faith and know that no matter what happens, God is with us. Thanks. Have a good week.